Good morning, everybody. The hearing come to order. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today, and our nominee, Mr. Duncan, congratulations. Welcome to the committee. And I'll make a brief opening statement. Oh, I thought he was already here. Yeah, they told me. There he is. Magically appears, as he always does, on time, under budget. Anyway, if it's okay to start now, is it all right?
I'm here.
Good, great.
I made it.
You did make it. Let it be.
Now we can start.
Let it be known that in Louisiana time, this is early. Yeah. So, anyway, Mr. Duncan was nominated by President Trump to be the Deputy Director of the OMB, as previously held by Dan Bishop, who is now U.S. Attorney for the Middle District, North Carolina. He currently serves at OMB. Mr. Duncan is Associate Director for Legislative Affairs and Executive Associate Director. He was delegated the duties of OMB Deputy Director not long ago. Mr. Duncan's previous jobs include Legislative Director for Congressman Chip Roy, worked in Senator Toomey's office, and at the National Senatorial Committee, so you understand it all on our side. Hal Duncan grew up in Texas and graduated from the University of Virginia, which is quite a journey. He currently lives in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Amy, and son, Patrick. Welcome to them. From my point of view, you understand the agency. You've been over there for a while. You're acting in the role that you've been nominated for. I've had a good meeting with you. You're young and enthusiastic and smart, just like everybody on this committee, so I think you'll do very well. Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Chairman Grant. And thank you, Mr. Duncan, for joining us today, and I appreciate your dropping by to talk yesterday. Today, we consider your nomination to be Deputy Director of OMB, and it's a position of immense responsibility. The Deputy Director serves as a number 2, and it's Chief Operating Officer, overseeing day-to-day operations as well as helping to manage budget information and regulatory oversight and policy implementation across the executive branch. So that is a vast, vast portfolio. It's a Senate-confirmed position since 1974, and our 22 previous deputy directors have brought decades of budget management or legislative experience to this role. I'm concerned, Mr. Duncan, that your resume is a bit thin, so I'll look forward to your comments about your experience today. Less than 2 years as Associate Director of OMB's Office of Legislative Affairs, 2 years as Legislative Director as a member of the House, for a member of the House, and working on the Hill less than 2 years in the Republican Senate Campaign Committee. Over the next year, OMB is requesting a budget of $179,645 employees, so that's a vast, set of personnel and responsibilities in comparison to some of your previous roles. It's a complex agency, hundreds of employees, highly technical issues, many fields of expertise. Furthermore, in your current role as Associate Director of OMB's Office of Legislative Affairs, OMB has essentially stonewalled Congress and this committee, not responding to a single letter that I have sent. And it may be different, maybe that's only on this side of the aisle and not the other side of the aisle, but that would be a concern as well, because really the executive branch needs to work with both sides of the aisle. So a question I would pose, if as legislative director, one of the simplest tasks, which is making sure that letters from Congress are responded to, if you have not been able to succeed in that role, why should we feel you're prepared for this much more complex role? I look forward to your response to that. Since President Trump and Russell Vought have returned to office, they have repeatedly violated the Constitution's separation of power, usurping Congress's power to declare war through President Trump's war of choice, usurping Congress's power to tax through the President's tariffs, which the Supreme Court ruled were unconstitutional, usurping Congress's power of the purse, starting programs that are unauthorized, ending programs that are authorized and funded. On 7 separate occasions, GAO has found that OMB violated the basic separation of powers of our Constitution. I'd like to know whether you have studied this and whether you're prepared to make sure that the Constitution is defended in OMB's actions. Also, there has been the firing of thousands of federal workers who are there to execute the vision laid out by Congress. We do have a Constitution where Congress lays out the vision, and Congress lays out the funding and the authorization. But if the people are fired, then that vision is not executed. So concerned about that. It'd be different if legislation had been passed saying downsize this significantly, or do not spend these funds, or reduce the funds. One of the agencies that was very dramatic was the dismantling of USAID. And we talked about this yesterday, and you noted to me that the responsibilities had simply been transferred to the Department of State. I did not find that to be a full and credible answer, since essentially, yes, there was a transfer, but in the process, its responsibilities and portfolio were dramatically decreased, leading our various departments or schools of public health to estimate that about 500,000 children have died as a result of the sudden shutdown of programs for malaria, HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, nutrition, and dysentery. That's a huge consequential action for the executive to take an action, dismantle a program that's authorized and funded by Congress, resulting in the death of hundreds of thousands of children. If the president doesn't want that program, he needs to ask us not to fund it, not to authorize it, not to shut it down on its own. I'd like to know your opinion about whether in the future you will oppose shutting down programs when Congress has funded them and authorized them. And I'm concerned about the budget proposal put forward by OMB because it does nothing to help families struggling with affordability, nothing on gas prices, nothing on grocery prices, no plan to address or save Social Security, which will start running out of money in just 5 to 6 years. No plan to help farmers affected by the high diesel prices and the fertilizer prices. No meaningful revenue proposals to help reduce the deficit. In fact, no plan to pay for the war in Iran. Throughout all of this, you have been at OMB, which raises concerns. Will you be simply a rubber stamp, or will you fight to defend the Constitution and the balance of powers laid out in our Constitution? I look forward to your thoughts. Thank you.
Would you please rise? Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Well, thank you. I'll start off, and I think we got a pretty good list here. Promise me you're going to answer letters.
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Forgot. Clearly, I'm not going to listen to it, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you, Chairman Graham, Ranking Member Merkley, and members of this esteemed committee for holding this hearing. I am humbled and honored by the opportunity to come before you as President Trump's nominee for Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. I want to begin by thanking my wonderful wife, Amy, and my delightfully rambunctious son, Patrick, for joining me today. And here's to hoping that Patrick is not escorted out by Capitol Police at some point in this hearing. I would not be in this position without their love and support. I also want to thank my mom, dad, and brother for traveling from Texas to support me, as well as my in-laws who traveled from Richmond, Virginia to be here. I hope this hearing will help answer the question my family often poses to me. So what exactly do you do? Of course, I also want to thank Director Vought. It has been the honor of a lifetime serving alongside Director Vought at OMB for the past year and a half as we work to put an end to fiscal futility and deliver on the bold agenda set forth by President Trump. Former Deputy Director Dan Bishop testified before this committee that Director Vought was the man to get management of the federal government back on track. That, of course, has proven correct 10 times over. If confirmed, I look forward to serving as Director Vought's deputy and continuing our work to support the president and protect the American taxpayer. While relatively unknown and small in size, OMB's mission is broad and its reach is wide. OMB crafts the president's budget, manages the federal government, reforms regulations, and coordinates policies across agencies. I believe this work is best characterized by the quiet competence the agency exhibits in support of the president and thereby the American people. OMB's career staff are among the best and brightest in the federal government, and it has been a pleasure to work with them and learn from them as Associate Director for Legislative Affairs and Executive Associate Director. I joined OMB in January 2025 with the goal of working with Congress to address out-of-control spending and implement President Trump's plan to usher in a new golden age for America. I've been particularly proud to work with members and staff of this committee to develop and pass 2 budget reconciliation bills that directly reflect that goal, the Working Families Tax Cuts Act and the Secure America Act. The Working Families Tax Cuts Act cut taxes for American families and businesses while achieving $2 trillion in mandatory savings and securing generational investments in defense and homeland security. The Secure America Act built on that success by providing sustained funding for the brave men and women of ICE and Border Patrol who work every day to secure our border and keep our communities safe. I was also proud to work with this body to pass the first standalone rescissions package since 1992, which cut $9 billion in wasteful and weaponized spending. Building on that success, we worked together to complete the fiscal year 2026 appropriations process in a fiscally responsible manner. We have made historic progress in righting our fiscal ship over the past 18 months, but there is more to be done. I believe we owe it to American families to be relentless in our pursuit of a federal government that spends taxpayer dollars wisely, delivers services efficiently, and reduces regulatory burdens. If confirmed, that pursuit will drive me as Deputy Director, and I commit to maintaining a strong relationship with Congress to ensure our impacts are enduring. Thank you for considering my nomination. I look forward to your questions and the opportunity to discuss how OMB can continue to deliver on its vital mission.
Well, thank you. Well done. So when your family asks you what you do, what do you tell them?
Currently, as you know, I serve as Associate Director for Legislative Affairs. In that capacity, I work directly with Congress to advance the administration's spending priorities. I think some of the things that I mentioned in my testimony
They ask you, what would you do in your new job? What would you tell them?
It's a great question. I think of a lot of it as a continuation of what I've been doing as Executive Associate Director. I view that as a more internal-facing role in which I represent OMB in meetings with agencies, coordinating with my counterparts across the different agencies and within the Executive Office of the President, and fundamentally managing, supporting the management of OMB, its career and political staff writ large across all of its branches.
And how long have you been doing this job you're in now?
I have been with the administration since the first week of President Trump's nomination, so I believe since January 24th, 2025.
How long have you been acting deputy? The job you're in now, how long you've had that?
Appreciate the question. I don't remember off the top of my head when I was delegated the duties. I believe it was sometime late last year.
Okay, for a while.
Yes, sir.
You feel comfortable doing the job?
Absolutely. Comfortable and very excited by the opportunity, if confirmed.
Okay. If we write letters to you, will you answer them?
Yes, sir.
Good. Let's talk about the budget real quickly. The budget's kind of an outline that the president submits to Congress and kind of a view of what we should be doing as a nation. Do you support the president's defense budget request?
Senator, absolutely. I think the threats that we've seen in this world necessitate that level of defense spending.
So you think it's justified, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. During the Biden years, they submitted budgets too. Very few of them were approved as submitted. What's the biggest difference between this OMB, and Biden in terms of budget?
Absolutely. I think we've seen the successes of the past. Fiscal year 2026, we were able to secure a defense top line of $1 trillion by using both the mandatory and discretionary strategy. The president has recently recommitted to that strategy as recently as last week, calling for Congress to pass $350 billion worth of mandatory spending for our defense. So I believe we use the strategies that we have proven work over the past year and continue to move forward to deliver to provide for the defense of the American people.
If we can't pass a supplemental through the appropriations process dealing with defense and other matters, Democratic friends will want some things too. Do you believe a third reconciliation bill focusing on defense and fraud would be justified?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Are you ready to work with this committee to craft that reconciliation bill if necessary?
Yes, sir, absolutely. We've done 2 together, and I'm looking forward to a third.
So what areas would you focus on other than defense? In the area of fraud, do you have sort of a vision what we could do in reconciliation to combat fraud?
Well, I think in terms of fraud, supporting the work of the Fraud Task Force is certainly critical. I've been honored to be OMB's designee to the Fraud Task Force and have been able to see how the Vice President and his team have used the task force to coordinate amongst the agencies to root out waste and fraud to a degree we've not seen in recent memory. So fundamentally, supporting the Fraud Task Force, ensuring that they have the tools they need to target fraud and root it out, I think are 2 of the most important things we could do in a reconciliation package.
Thank you, Senator Merkley.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So in your prepared remarks, you noted I'm committed to maintaining a strong relationship with Congress. So I noted in my introductory comments that none of the letters that I've sent, and I have here all 6 letters to OMB, none of them have been responded to. Yet you just committed to Mr. Graham's, Chairman Graham, that you're going to respond to letters. If you couldn't make that happen as the legislative liaison, when it's a pretty straightforward, simple task, why would there be such a change in your new position?
Well, Senator, first of all, I appreciate the question and thank you for meeting with me last night. As mentioned in our meeting last night, some of the letters that we discussed would have asked for the disclosure of pre-decisional and deliberative information, also information directly related to ongoing court actions. But that being said, we are committed to improving our letter process. We've been in the process of implementing a new process to speed up response timelines to letters. So we're looking forward to that and hope to work with you on that as well.
Okay, well, I just consider 0 out of 6 a pretty bad batting average. And as we discussed yesterday, certainly even when there's future uncertainty regarding lawsuits or future actions, it doesn't mean you can't respond. It means you can respond and say, here are the restraints, here are the restrictions. And so I strongly encourage a very different approach to communicating with Congress. I wanted to turn to basically this question of when you became the acting director, deputy director.
The exact timeline. Senator,
You mentioned last night, November or December of last year.
it was about November of December. I actually wasn't able to go to the office this morning post our meeting yesterday, so I'm happy to follow up as the exact timeline that I was delegated the duties, and I can do that in QFRs or right after this hearing.
So it was only 5 months after basically November that we learned that you had adopted or been delegated these responsibilities. As head of legislative affairs, wouldn't that have been relevant to fill in Congress that this was your new role?
Senator, I appreciate the question. Obviously, we were working on a nomination timeline as well. I was delegated the duties in Dan Bishop's absence, which effectively has been filling in for him and his duties in that time period. But certainly understand the point. But my nomination went up in April, and I look forward to working with you on OMB-related topics if confirmed.
Do you believe the 2020 election was rigged?
I believe that Joe Biden was certified as the winner of the 2020 election.
He was certified, yes, but do you believe the election outcome was rigged?
Senator, I appreciate the question. As mentioned, I believe that Joe Biden was certified as the winner of the 2020 election.
Duly noted that you're not responding to the question. You're familiar with the Impoundment Control Act,
Yes, Senator, I am.
and there is essentially a constitutional understanding that has been reinforced by the Supreme Court twice, that the power of the purse cannot be delegated to the president. No matter how much the president wants to cancel programs that are authorized and funded or start programs that aren't funded, doesn't get to decide that. And yet, what we're seeing is programs getting canceled, like I mentioned the ID. Will you defend the separation of powers and throw up a cautionary yellow flag and express some concerns if the strategy of OMB is to cancel an authorized and funded program?
Well, Senator, I certainly appreciate the question. I firmly commit to upholding the Constitution. As you know, the president ran on restoring the impoundment authority. It's an authority that presidents had exercised for over 200 years. And that being said, we have been in full compliance with the Impoundment Control Act to date. But fundamentally, this question has been litigated multiple times before this committee, and look forward to continuing to work with you on it.
So really, that wasn't an answer to the question. The administration has shut down programs that are authorized and funded. If there's another proposal to shut down a program that's authorized and funded, will you raise, not that, I'm not asking about whether you'll publicly oppose it, you're going to be working for the director. Will you strive to make sure that there's a yellow flag put up and said, you know, this may be violating the separation of powers?
Appreciate the question. Senator, I would commit to abiding by the Constitution and the laws on the books.
Okay, let me turn to, well, I'm over my time, so you're spared any additional questions. Thank you.
Senator Grass.
I thank whoever gave me their slot. Thank you very much. I think that President Trump is doing a real good job of bringing the regulatory state, reining it in. At the start of his term, President Trump set a benchmark of slashing 10 existing regulations for every new regulation issued. I understand the administration's far exceeded that with maybe a ratio of 1 to 29, 129. How accurate is that number? And what has this meant in terms of time and dollars saved by the private sector? And can that be measured with some certainty?
Senator, absolutely, and appreciate the question. So the number that you referenced, the 129 to 1, obviously are extremely proud of. It does include things like guidance documents that have the effect of regulations in there, but we are far exceeding the 10 to 1 ratio. We have exceeded over $1 trillion worth of savings to the economy via the deregulatory agenda. The repeal of the endangerment finding alone saved the economy an estimated $1.3 trillion. We're excited to put out our next unified agenda related to our regulatory agenda for this coming year. And with that, we will have additional information that we'll be able to share related to the fiscal impacts of our deregulatory policies.
Yeah. On my next question, just keep in the back of your mind, the reason I'm asking about wind energy is I authored that legislation in 1992. One of the stated objectives of the administration deregulatory agenda is to eliminate obstacles to energy production. As a supporter of all the above energy strategies, I'm concerned that this commitment isn't being applied consistently to all forms of energy. In Iowa, several wind energy projects are currently halted. This is due to some revaluation of wind energy mitigation agreement process performed by the Department of Defense. My staff has been in contact with DOD, and I understand that there's an effort to identify projects of low national security concerns for approval. What is OMB's role in this process? And will you commit to working with me to mitigate bureaucratic red tape standing in the way of Iowa wind projects? By the way, we get 60% of our electricity in Iowa from wind.
Well, Senator, I appreciate the question. I'm not directly familiar with the matter at hand. I'm happy to take that back to our team, but certainly committed to working with you on it.
Well, if you'll do that, I'll appreciate it. So I hope my staff heard that and they'll get in touch with you pretty darn soon. As part of the Working Families Tax Cut Act, Congress extended and modified the Clean Fuels Tax Credit with an eye towards making it work better for farmers. Seeing this law implemented properly and in a timely fashion is a top priority of mine. In April, OMB, USDA submitted to your agency a biofuels feedstock rule that related to accurately calculating this credit. This rule is necessary to ensure farmers can fully participate in the program. When can farmers expect OMB to complete this review process? And before you answer that, I just think over the weekend, this process may have been smoothed out a little bit by finally the Department of Energy reaching some agreements that were necessary before you would get the rule.
Senator, I appreciate the question. We're closely tracking the 45Z rule, which, as you mentioned, is currently in the 12866 process at OIRA. Understand the priority to your constituents about getting this rule out. I believe we're making progress, and hopefully we'll have an update for you on that soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Duncan, you're up for a very important job running the nerve center of the federal government. It is really, really critical that you can be depended upon to follow the law and to speak up when you believe others are not. Can we count on you to do that?
Senator, I appreciate the question. I will commit to following the law and upholding the Constitution.
So to that end, and following up a bit on what Senator Merkley was asking you, can you assure all of us that OMB will not attempt to do another end run around Congress with an illegal pocket rescission this September?
Senator, I appreciate the question. As it relates to the pocket rescissions had been executed by previous administrations, notably the Ford administration following the passage of the Impoundment Control Act. I can't commit to any of the fiscal tools the administration may or may not use in the future, but certainly look forward to working with you.
Well, I'm glad you want to work with me, but pocket rescission is a critical issue, and I am concerned about the answer that you just gave. Well, but let me move on. OMB recently proposed a rule to overhaul the federal grant-making system that allows you to terminate grants but based on some vague, quote, administration values or priorities. That really sounds to me like you all are trying to turn the entire federal government to this one big slush fund to reward those aligned with the administration and punish everyone else. One of the provisions in that actually prohibits funding any activities that promote, quote, anti-American values. Now, under this administration, that could mean practically anything, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. So let me ask you, if this proposed rule went into effect, what limits would be placed on the administration's ability to award grants to its political allies or deny funding to anyone else?
Well, Senator, I appreciate the question. Obviously, the rule is currently in the proposed phase. It'll close for comment, I believe, on July 13th. The rule is fundamentally about accountability in ensuring that we are able to have a good oversight over the grant process and that it is in alignment with the administration's agenda. But as it relates to the rule, we will certainly follow the statutes that govern underlying programs and are committed to ensuring that federal taxpayer dollars are awarded in a way that is responsible.
Well, I was looking for a concrete answer. Is there any language in it that I didn't see any, but I'll ask you, places limits on cronyism?
Senator, we would move forward with the rule and move forward with the agencies in a manner that is consistent with applicable law.
Well, the way I read it, the reality is that a political appointee like you could terminate a cancer research grant or a hospital grant solely because of the president's whim or personal vendetta, and to me, that is really unacceptable. We all know how this administration would abuse this. I really hope all of our colleagues will join us to stop this, and they should remember what goes around comes around, but I think that is a very concerning proposed rule and allows OMB to make political decisions that they should not be making. So I think we should all be worried about that. Just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. Let me ask about another issue. Last week, we learned that the Social Security Trust Fund will run out of money in just 6 years, 3 months sooner than previously estimated. When he was pressed on this, Speaker Johnson insisted that entitlements should be, quote, adjusted. Well, I've been around long enough to know that adjustment means cuts. You have worked for Republicans like Chip Roy, who support benefit reductions. Elon Musk, who had free reign over the federal government, has called Social Security a, quote, Ponzi scheme. So it's kind of no surprise that Trump's latest budget request did not include any solvency proposal for Social Security. Why doesn't OMB view Social Security solvency as an important enough issue to include in a budget request?
Senator, I appreciate the question, and as the director testified as on a similar question when he was up here, President Trump has been immensely clear on his support for protecting Social Security and Medicare, and that will continue to be the North Star for this administration moving forward.
But nothing in the budget request, and for all of our knowledge, for decades, presidents have presented a full budget, including projections and proposals for mandatory programs like Social Security. So this administration simply is failing to do its most important work. I got to guess because they don't care. You know, Democrats have introduced a number of proposals to address the solvency crisis without cutting benefits. We haven't seen anything from this administration. Doing nothing means that seniors are going to see a 22% cut in their Social Security benefits in 2032. That's about $10,000 a year per couple. So we expect this administration to do in the budget what previous presidents have done and present us a proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Duncan, congratulations on your nomination. You know, there's an awful lot of bipartisan whistling by the graveyard here, and I think we're hearing it from the other side right now. Let's just get a couple facts before I get some questions. 2019, before the pandemic, we spent $4.4 trillion. This year, we will spend well over $7 trillion. That's almost a 70% increase over what we spent in 2019, correct?
Senator, that's correct.
I have seen the low estimate in terms of fraud out of that $7 trillion, about $250 billion a year. We had in front of a subcommittee, CEO of LexisNexis, I didn't realize he did research on this, said it's about $1 trillion a year. I know Secretary Besant claims it's somewhere around $500 billion. So there's a range, $250 billion to $1 trillion a year in fraud. And you know, we're concerned about the executive actually managing the budget and trying to stop that fraud. I was interested in Dr. Oz pointing out the fact that 1/3 of hospice centers are in Los Angeles. And so when you stop funding 400 of them, not one complained. Not one. 400 fraudulent hospice centers. You know, how many billions of dollars is going out to fraud? So you're fully aware, and I appreciate the work you did help me get a little bit more funding for OMB. I was interested, Senator Merkley pointed out that your budget is about $175 million a year. Divided by 7.5 trillion, that's about 0.0025%. I would say most major corporations spend a whole lot more on their controller department to try and manage the financial situation of the business. I think we should be doing a whole lot more managing of the federal budget. So that's why, you know, and I appreciate you working with me to get $100 million. Sounds like a lot, but it's a drop in the bucket to try and focus on the management side. So I just want to give you an opportunity, what you've been working on the management side, the line-by-line evaluation of the budget, the program-by-program. Again, it's not easy to do. You know, the AI we're trying to establish so we can find the information where you got 400 fraudulent hospice centers in LA, but I'll give you the floor.
Absolutely. And, appreciate the question, Senator, and appreciate you working with us so hard on this. It's been a great relationship that we've had. And really quick on the fraud point, I think that's why the fraud task force is so important, is there are estimates of fraud, but we really don't know. We really don't have a solid number, and there's so many limitations that we keep uncovering as the task force is going out and investigating this. So
let me just quick interject too. trying to prosecute and recover is almost impossible. I think the latest Department of Justice figures they're prosecuting something like $4.7 billion versus almost maybe $1,000 billion. So you have to prevent it on the front side like Dr. Oz did, correct? Again, the president's chief executive faithfully execute the laws, and part of that is to make sure we don't have the waste, fraud, and abuse.
Absolutely, Senator. It's so important that we put these controls on the front end, which is why I think some of the actions that we're taking in 2 CFR is really important. Under the 2 CFR Uniform Guidance Regulations for grant making, every agency will be required to be using the do not pay lists before they send out funding. If IGs catch fraud, they would be required to send the instance of that fraud to the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia within 10 days. So we think a lot of these controls, in addition to the accountability of having one of the president's political personnel serving as kind of the last check on a grant before it goes out, will certainly help us manage the federal budget and ensure that we're stopping fraud on the front end, because it's so hard to combat on the back end.
So wouldn't it be nice if our colleagues on the other side of the aisle would be concerned about that $250 billion to $1 trillion of fraud and actually work with the administration to encourage, for example, their governors to provide the information to the federal government so we can stop it before it's ever spent? Can you talk a little bit about the frustration this administration is having in terms of getting the data they need to analyze it to prevent fraud from going out the door in the first place?
Senator, I think that's a great question. I think in the SNAP program, we've seen many states being unwilling to provide information to USDA. Certain states have been willingly providing information to ensure that there are proper controls in the SNAP program as that funding is going out, but we've seen many states refuse to do it. Now, obviously, we think this is a bipartisan issue. We think that we can bring everyone to the table on this, and we would hope that people would do so moving forward to have permanent, enduring reforms, because I don't believe that anyone here wants to see fraud in federal government.
And of course, that's my goal of using that $100 million to establish a permanent AI program and a structure and programs within OMB to properly manage this and, again, prevent the money from going out, where you can never recover it. But thank you, Mr. Duncan. Congratulations.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Duncan, I applaud you for your judgment. Just like me, you grew up in another state and married a Virginian. So we have that connection. Was the 2024 presidential election rigged?
Senator, President Trump won the 2024 presidential election.
Yeah, folks, how about that? So he was asked twice, was the 2020 presidential election rigged? And he said President Biden was certified to be the winner. He wouldn't answer the question. Saying President Biden was certified as the winner of that election is like saying today is Tuesday, June 16. I mean, it's a fact. But he wouldn't acknowledge that President Biden won that race. Now, there's only one of two reasons, Mr. Duncan. You have either fallen victim to the conspiracy mindset that says that that election was rigged, and if you're a conspiracy theorist, you shouldn't be let anywhere near the position you've been nominated for. Or, President Biden won the election, but you're afraid of making an insecure president mad by acknowledging that fact. You answered so easily when I asked you the question about 2024. You didn't fight, you didn't evade, you didn't obscure, you didn't try to end run. You said President Trump won the election, which he did. He won the popular vote, he won the Electoral College. The answer was just as simple about 2020. The fact that you were unable to give the simple answer about 2020 raises real serious questions about you. Let me ask you this. In your current position, I believe you're a legislative affairs director for USAID, which its programs, to the extent they're being delivered at all, are sort of being delivered through state and others, but OMB is sort of managing the wind down of the operation. We are currently in the midst of a severe global health crisis. We've got an Ebola outbreak in Africa that's accelerating rapidly and that some experts have warned could be extremely dangerous. We're seeing screwworm return to the United States after decades of work to eradicate it. We've got measles outbreaks in communities that haven't had major measles issues since the vaccine became available. We've had 111 cases in Virginia so far this year, and we only had 25 last year. Meanwhile, what's the administration been doing to prepare for these types of global health issues? We withdrew from the World Health Organization, undermining our ability to coordinate with other nations on responses. After withdrawing, it was interesting, Secretary Rubio said, WHO didn't do a good job of picking up Ebola. Thanks, Sherlock. The U.S. backs out of the WHO. We quit funding it. We quit participating. The organization isn't as effective in picking up a disease that could harm Americans. We've canceled hundreds of millions in HHS mRNA vaccine funding, and we're trying to cancel billions more in CDC grants related to pandemic. We've illegally shuttered USAID, one of the agencies that's responsible for the progress we had made in combating screwworm, not to mention one of the agencies key to addressing Ebola outbreaks. The Trump administration has pushed out experts across the government, not just at USAID. Employees at the Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service are down a quarter. CDC is down a quarter. Many specific offices at HHS have lost tons of employees. They haven't told us how many yet. And today, the OMB is still withholding $2 billion in congressionally passed global health funding from last year, FY25. The administration only started to release some of these monies way late after the Ebola outbreak got bad. Now, to my colleagues, last week in an appropriations hearing, Secretary Rubio testified that he's ready to utilize this $2 billion from FY25 to deal with global health issues, but he's waiting for the OMB to release the money. Release the money from FY25 when we're dealing with Ebola, screwworm, measles, hantavirus. Is the OMB going to release this money, or are you going to wait for more health crises to emerge?
Well, Senator, I certainly appreciate the question. I believe you referenced to this, but we have already notified via state who is managing these programs and who is requesting funds off of the congressional notification that you're referring to. We've already notified up to Congress that $100 million of the global health security funding involved in that CN is going to combat Ebola. We have also apportioned an additional $500 million on top of that from that CN to go towards Ebola as well.
Apportioned, is that the same as released, or is that internally we think we might one day make these monies available?
From the OMB perspective, that would be releasing.
And when will that money be released?
I would have to defer to the State Department. They would submit a congressional notification on these funds.
Okay, but I just, again, to remind my colleagues, Secretary Rubio said he wants to use this $2 billion from FY25 to combat these global crises, and he's waiting on OMB to release it. So my time is up, but I'm just going to say, should you be confirmed, but even before there's any vote on confirmation, in the midst of these crises, OMB should release the money that Congress allocated over a year ago to deal with precisely these kinds of health emergencies. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Duncan, every now and then I see an article that says something like federal government spends $25 million to study whether a man can breastfeed. Or the federal government spends $50 million to try to teach a neighborhood squirrel to code. And I think, how did that stuff get in there? I sit on the Appropriations Committee. We're supposed to put together a budget. Sometimes we do. This year we probably won't, because my friend and colleague, Senator Schumer, wants to shut down the government, to create chaos, to try to get the Graham-Plattner wing of his party to love him. But I digress. That stuff's not in the budget when we vote on the budget. Where's it come from?
Well, Senator, I appreciate the question, and you've been a champion on these issues, and I would note your work on the rescissions process, highlighting some of these outrageous spending we've seen in the past. So I think this is why our updates to 2 CFR, which governs grant making across the federal enterprise, is so critical.
Yeah, tell the American people what that is.
Absolutely appreciate the
Like you're
opportunity.
talking to a 10th grader.
Appreciate the opportunity to. So fundamentally, some of the most important things are to ensure that grants are not going to divisive DEI ideologies. They're not going to support illegal immigration. They're not going to support radical gender ideologies. Those are pretty fundamental.
And stupid stuff, right?
And stupid stuff generally, yes, sir. I think the arbiter of ensuring that things do not go to stupid stuff, as you put it, is ultimately a political appointee. One of the president's people that is associated with the administration, appointed by the president, comes in and does a final issuance review before grant dollars go out. That's fundamentally about accountability. It's not intended to usurp peer review or anything like that. It's about making sure that
Let me stop you for a second, Mr. Duncan, because we're going to run out of time. Congress never sees this kind of spending porn, does it, until after the fact. Is that correct?
Senator, that's correct.
It's not in our budget. Is that correct?
Senator, that is correct.
But somebody in the administrative state decides that they ought to spend $25 million to study whether a man can breastfeed. Right?
Yes, sir.
Now, that's what I mean by stupid stuff. Do you consider that stupid stuff?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And what you're going to do at OMB is try to stop the stupid stuff. Try to find out who made that grant and say, no. We're not going to spend money on this. And by the way, if you do it again, you're fired.
Yes,
Is that
sir,
right? That's what you guys are going to do?
Yes, sir.
It's about time. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, let me ask you one other question. When moms and dads lie down to sleep at night and can't, right now, at this point in time, what's the first thing they're worried about?
I would imagine it would be the ability to support their families.
Yes. Cost of living. Part of that's inflation. Look, I remember inflation's very sticky. I remember when it started, it got up 9%. You know, President Trump didn't father this child, but he's got to raise it. Cost of living. Thank you for being straightforward. Now, have you ever gone to let me preface this by saying, I've got 2 doctors, brothers who are doctors, so I love healthcare providers. But have you ever gone to a healthcare provider and then you get a bill saying you owe us $1,400? And you go, what the hell? Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, sir, it actually has.
It's happened to a lot of Americans because the way many of our hospital or healthcare providers bill makes no sense. And so they turn it over to a collection agency, and the collection agency says, look, you pay this $1,400. We can't explain, we won't explain to you how it got here. If we did, we'd have to drown you in the Pacific. But if you don't pay it, we're going to turn it into the credit rating agencies and ruin your credit. Now, why don't, if we want to help the American people, why don't we, at least for a period of time, say healthcare debt is not going to be reported to the rating agencies? It's not, we're not saying you don't have to pay it. We're not saying it's not due. We're not saying you can't be sued. But this debt's being reported to rating agencies when people can't pay it, and then their credit gets ruined, and it makes it even harder for them to live. That's a swell idea, isn't it?
Senator, I think the administration has been very committed to price transparency and ensuring that.
Yeah,
folks
but what
aren't hit
about
with
that
this.
idea?
I'm happy to take that back and determine the administration's position on that matter.
How about it advocating for it?
I'm happy to work with you on this matter, absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry I went way over. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to state that I'm a little fascinated by Senator Kennedy's media feed. But
My what?
Your social media feed, sir.
Oh,
But I digress. Appreciate you being here to answer questions as we consider your nomination. Let me begin with a question relative to OMB's May 2026 proposed rule to implement a sweeping overhaul of the uniform guidance governing federal grants and financial assistance. It would actually substantially expand agencies' authority to suspend or terminate awards, elevate the role of political appointees in grant decisions, and centralize government-wide grant-making rules through the OMB. Now, the proposal, as I'm sure you've heard, has generated significant concern among states, amongst local governments, amongst universities, nonprofit organizations, and other recipients of federal funds. Now, many of us here in Congress are extremely concerned about the true objective of this rulemaking, which would be to provide cover for the politically motivated actions of this administration to cancel thousands of grants deemed to not be aligned with the president's partisan political agenda, actions that have been repeatedly found by the courts to be illegal and unconstitutional. These changes are meant to make it easier for the administration to override funding decisions made by Congress. Colleagues, Congress is the separate and co-equal branch of government. And the rule would inject political considerations into the administration of federal grants. So my question is pretty simple. If confirmed, will you commit that the OMB will not use the uniform guidance or any future revisions to it as a vehicle to circumvent congressional spending decisions or to impose policy conditions that Congress itself did not enact?
Senator, certainly appreciate the question. Fundamentally, the updates to 2 CFR are about accountability, ensuring that someone that is accountable directly to the president is ultimately signing off on these final decisions in our trillion-dollar grant-making enterprise. The law, the CFR, the updated to the Code of Federal Regulations, will be done in a manner that's consistent with applicable laws. But this is a method by which the administration is proposing to get its arms around the enterprise that we've seen abused in the past.
So, colleagues, for the record, that's an articulate, diplomatic way of saying, yes, it's whatever the president wants. That's the objective here. That's your answer. And I'll advise my colleagues that if this rule changes, it's not a change just for the balance of this administration. It's a permanent change. And at some point, there will be a Democratic majority, there will be a Democratic president in the White House with this rule change, if that's the road you go down. My second area of question is relative to CDFI funding. As bipartisan members of Congress have communicated to agency leadership over the last year, CDFIs play a vital role in delivering capital and financial services to communities and businesses that lack access to traditional lending. OMB's purposeful delay of these funds has created significant uncertainty for the organizations that serve as a lifeline and frankly do a critical job in boosting our economy. After over a year of withholding these funds and many calls from Congress, again, both sides of the aisle, OMB just recently released the fiscal year 25 CDFI fund awards. However, Director Vought, in his response to this committee's questions on the proposed cuts to the program for fiscal year 27, continued to make unsubstantiated claims of widespread abuse. I've heard you say it in this hearing. You're concerned about abuse. You're concerned about abuse. If there's unsubstantiated claims of abuse, you're making it up and using it as a pretext to hold much-needed funding, and clearly, increasingly, on a partisan basis. So I'll try to ask you again clearly, will you commit to ending OMB's interference with the fiscal year 25 CDFI funding of notice of funding availability, as well as the 26 apportionment, and ensure the timely obligation and disbursement of future funds as intended by Congress? Yes or no?
Senator, I appreciate the question. As you mentioned, OMB was conducting a programmatic review of the 25-26 CDFI funds. Those funds have since been apportioned, and NOFOs are moving out on them right now. So I commit to ensuring that the funds are spent in a responsible manner, and we will obviously be taking those steps to ensure that there aren't abuse in the funds, and we'll release them once those safeguards are in place.
Look, as you know, time is money, and so when there's delays in this funding, it undermines the economic benefit of these programs. And if there was a long track record of abuse, you can make the argument for additional review. But when they're unsubstantiated, it's uncalled for and damaging to the American economy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Duncan, thank you for being here. So in my lifetime, here's what's happened to the costs. When I went to college, it cost $200 to go to junior college for a whole semester and $255 to go to a whole semester of university, and you could take as many hours as you wanted, right? You could buy a home in the suburbs for $21,000, a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, in a safe, nice suburb. You could buy a brand new car for $1,600. You could buy annual health care for a family of 4 for $700. So you look today, $25,000 plus for a family of 4 for health care. You can't hardly find a new car for less than $20,000. You can't buy, the article said that 242 home, or I think something like 242 cities in this country starter homes around $1 million. So do you think government's had any role in causing all this inflation?
Senator, appreciate the question and absolutely think government has had a role, and that's why the administration's deregulatory and spending agenda is so critical to getting these costs down, undoing the burdens placed on the American people by the previous administration, and continue to try to drive costs down.
So if so we now have we'll hit $40 trillion of the debt this year. So $40 trillion of the debt, $1 trillion a year of interest expense. We are running $2 trillion deficits. So if that doesn't change, if we don't get to a balanced budget and start paying down the debt, do you think interest rates are going to just, just like that go down, way back down again?
I think we certainly need to continue to address deficit spending. I think we set forward a framework on how to do it this past year through rescissions, keeping the discretionary appropriations in a fiscally responsible manner, and also delivering on the mandatory savings that we did in the Working Families Tax Cuts Act. So we need to continue to move forward that model. I think to the chairman's point and to Senator Johnson's point, attacking the fraud is really important in getting our arms around this spending and continuing to bring down costs so we don't have the debt burden and interest rate problems that you're referring to.
So our country, all of us, and our military is completely dependent on Chinese drugs, right? We don't, almost all the ingredients in drugs are made in China. There's studies out of University of Indiana that tells us how unhealthy these drugs are. And they've held back, Chinese governments held back rare earth minerals. They could hold back pharmaceuticals easily, right? So do you think it's important for us to start building a domestic supply chain for pharmaceutical drugs? And also not, the other thing that's happening is that the Buy American Act and the Berry Amendment are supposed to guard against all this, Chinese drugs, but there's unbelievable waivers given all the time because we don't have enough supply here. Is there anything that you think the OMB can be doing to fix that?
Senator, I appreciate the question. Fundamentally, I think dedicating more resources to reshoring advanced drug manufacturing is fundamental. We did that in our FY27 budget proposal. Also, and I believe you've been involved in some of these efforts, our Office of Federal Procurement Policy, as well as our Made in America office, are working together to ensure that we are taking policies administratively to promote domestic drug manufacturing. I think a really critical way of doing that is sending demand signals through the federal procurement process, which we've done on a number of items. So absolutely committed to doing that. It's a priority for the administration, and look forward to continuing to work with you on it.
Kevin Rhodes has done a great job.
Absolutely.
So President Trump and OMB have done a great job You know, we've worked to cut taxes, identify and eliminate fraudulent payments. What would you like Congress to do to help OMB do a better job doing, you know, fulfilling the agenda that Trump got elected on?
Well, Senator, absolutely appreciate the question. I think, as mentioned, kind of building upon the successes that we saw last year is really critical. We really laid out a playbook to how to keep spending under control while funding key priorities. So I think continuing to build on that. And frankly, I think continuing to bring stuff to OMB saying, hey, will you take a look at this? There are multiple times when we get information from the Congress highlighting an issue for us that we had not known. I think there's a conception that we know everything all the time. We know a lot of things. We're resource constrained, so we certainly rely on our colleagues in Congress to flag things for us. So I think just making sure we have that collaborative effort to make sure that we're delivering on reducing spending and reducing regulatory burdens is how we kind of continue to move forward.
Thanks. You're going to do a great job.
Thank you,
Thanks
Senator.
for all of your hard work and all your prior jobs.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Duncan, for being here. Do you think that being Deputy Director of OMB requires somebody of good character?
Senator, I appreciate the question. I do.
Do you have a Nazi tattoo on your body?
Senator, I do not have any tattoos, especially not a Nazi tattoo.
That would make you ineligible to be the Democrat nominee in Maine, but I'm glad that this will absolutely allow you to be the Deputy Director here at OMB. Since the last Budget Committee hearing, Mr. Chairman, we heard a lot about the stock market and a lot about oil prices. Nothing to do with your nomination, but I just thought for the record, just point out, Mr. Chairman, we have a record stock market. We have gas prices that are plummeting. It is making Democrats very, very sad. But the reality is President Trump's policies are working. So are you happy about that? Do you think this is good that we have record stock market and gas prices are dropping?
Senator, absolutely. And I think this gets back to Senator Kennedy's question as well. Obviously, it's critical for the administration. We wake up every morning to try to get prices down. So I think with the signing of the MOU and seeing the oil prices come down, we're going to see that prices continue to fall and the stock market continue to rocket.
Yeah, and then the added benefit of actually having a path to peace in the Middle East. So I just thought I'd point that out because at the last budget hearing, we heard a lot about, there was a lot, you wouldn't believe how many my colleagues turned into stock market prognosticators. Do you think the government of the United States of America at the federal level is working better, the same as, or worse than it was under the Biden administration in terms of efficiency? Forget politics. I'm just saying the efficiency, the blocking and tackling of being able to get your tax refunds, being able to deal with the federal government in terms of what you need. Is it better, worse, or the same?
Senator, I think it's functioning much better than it was under the previous administration.
So much better. And obviously, the number of federal employees matters, correct? I mean, typically you need humans on the other side of that phone call or email. What's the level of federal employment today versus where it was 2 years ago?
Senator, I believe that we've seen a reduction about 300,000 federal employees since this administration took office.
How many?
300,000.
300,000 less federal workers?
Yes, sir.
And the government's working much better?
Yes, sir.
How's that possible?
The administration has been able to identify efficiencies and remove bureaucracies that previously limited the efficient delivery of services.
How does that affect the taxpayer? So to somebody who lives in Chillicothe, Ohio, how does that affect them?
Well, fundamentally, it affects them by ensuring that they're getting their services more quickly, whether it's tax returns or what have you. But obviously, reducing headcount and seeing those individuals go and work in the private sector also reduces the federal fiscal burden carried with funding those employees as well.
Because you would agree that the federal government shouldn't be a works program for otherwise unqualified people, correct?
Senator, absolutely.
Right. So we've been able to eliminate 300,000 people from the federal workforce and yet operate our federal government more efficiently, which means we can lower the tax burden on American citizens. I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment. I turn on CNN every single morning. This morning, I didn't see the oil chart or the stock market chart that was magically had disappeared. But I have not seen this story. Why do you think it is that the media doesn't cover the fact that we have 300,000 plus less federal employees and yet operating the government more efficiently? Tax refunds are going out quicker. The government's more responsive. Does that seem like a disconnect?
I think it absolutely seems like a disconnect.
Okay, perfect. Next question I have for you, and you talked about this with Senator Scott. We have obviously the Buy America Act. I'd like to also give a plug to Kevin Rhodes. He's doing a great job. Obviously, you know that the nitrile glove manufacturing epicenter of the entire universe is in Ohio. And how quickly do you think we can get these procurement orders done so that the former paper mill in Chillicothe, Ohio, which got shut down by a private equity fund that was best buddies with the Bidens, and we've now got that into a nitrile glove manufacturing facility that's going to start thriving. When can they expect to get orders so that we stop having Chinese nitrile gloves flooding the U.S. market?
No, Senator, absolutely appreciate the question, and I've really appreciated working with you on this issue. So as you may or may not know, we started moving out on a new contract to sort of consolidate nitrile glove procurement within the federal government for all agencies to ensure we are buying American nitrile gloves. So that contract began executing at the beginning of this month. It started with a few agencies and is going to roll out and expand to a larger swath. So I think we will start seeing the buying power and demand signal really expand here over the next few weeks.
And that's a huge contrast to what Biden was doing, which is just flooding the zone, giving these companies tens of millions of dollars, and they actually didn't produce a single solitary glove. What we're doing instead is giving them demand signals so that they can build their business and grow it. So it's an amazing accomplishment. I would be remiss if I didn't end by congratulating you on being nominated by the President of the United States. I think if we could clone you and duplicate you all over the government would run even more efficiently. Maybe we could take off another 300,000 permanent government employees. It's people like you that are called to service to work in the federal government. It's gratifying to see somebody of your skills, your character, go in there. I know you're going to do an amazing job. I look forward to voting to confirm you.
I appreciate that, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Duncan, just listening to your responses to Senator Moreno, I can tell you that the people who are waiting in long lines at Social Security regional offices don't think things have gotten more efficient. You're aware of the fact that the IRS has warned that this year's tax season was at risk due to staffing shortages. Are you aware of that fact?
Senator, obviously, we're trying to.
I'm just asking you if you're aware of that fact, that they warned that this year's tax season efficiency was at risk because of staffing shortages. Are you not aware of that?
I'm not aware of the exact item you're referring to. I'm happy to take a look at it if it's in front of you.
Yeah.
But obviously, everything that we are doing is toward a commitment for efficiency for the American people.
Well, in fact, you've had to rehire people who were fired at the IRS. That doesn't sound like it's more efficient to me. The same is true at FEMA. FEMA reinstated fire disaster response personnel ahead of the hurricane season because they were unprepared. Were you aware of that fact?
Senator, I'm not aware of this specific thing. That would be a FEMA-related item that I've been.
A lot of this, of course, feeds up through the OMB. The same is true of the National Weather Service. GSA cited staffing shortages on mission-critical needs. Were you aware of that?
I'd have to defer to the National Weather Service.
In fact, by early this year, an estimated 25,000 federal employees had been rehired after being initially terminated. Do you know how much that's cost the taxpayer rehiring the same people who were in the job before?
Senator, I don't have an estimate in front of me, but we're always working to optimize staffing levels.
Well, I have an estimate from the Partnership for Public Service. They're a nonpartisan entity. They say just that process of having to go through rehiring the same people that were fired cost the taxpayer $12 million. That doesn't sound more efficient to me. Mr. Duncan, your boss at OMB, Director Vought, has said, quote, "When civil servants wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains." He went on to say, and I quote, "We want to put them in trauma," unquote. Do you see merit-based civil servants as the villains?
Senator, first, Director Vought has addressed that quote multiple times in this committee.
I'm asking you what you believe. Do you believe civil servants are the villains?
As I mentioned in my testimony, I think the OMB civil servants, who are the ones I work most closely with, as well as Director Vought, who has a wonderful relationship with those civil servants, are among the best and brightest in the federal government.
Excellent. So you don't want to put them in trauma, do you?
Senator, that quote you're referring to, Director Vought has addressed, is related to certain bureaucracies in the federal government.
It's just a question for you, not for Mr. Vought. Do you want to put federal employees in trauma? Yes or no?
Senator, you're directly
I'm
referring
asking what
to.
your view is. Do you think it's a good idea to put federal employees in trauma?
I work very well with the civil servants at OMB. The quote that you're referring to was a reference to
I'm asking
weaponized
you,
bureaucracies.
Mr. Duncan, I'm asking you right now what your view is. Do you want to put federal employees into trauma? Yes or no?
Senator, like I said, I completely support the civil servants that work at OMB, and that quote that you're referring to has been taken out of
I
context and
was
has been
asking
addressed by
you
the
your
director up
view,
here.
so it's interesting you don't want to provide a direct answer. So listen, Senator Murray and others have raised concerns about this new proposal to completely politicize the grant-making process, the update to uniform guidance. I hope people can understand that coming from an administration that wants to create a slush fund to use taxpayer dollars to make payouts to individuals convicted of assaulting Capitol Police on January 6th, the idea of further politicizing the grant process is really, really alarming. And I know this is in process. I want to talk to you about another political effort going on to make sure that you want to replace about 8,000 merit-based civil servants with political appointees. You want to make 8,000 positions at will. And I was just looking through the OMB list here of people who would now be made at will. One of those senior policy analysts positions a physical scientist. Why do you want to make that into a political position?
Senator, I appreciate the question, and I think both the updates to 2 CFR and the schedule policy career are about one thing, and that's accountability. So as it relates to the individuals placed in schedule policy career, it's fundamentally about ensuring that they're delivering on the job.
So if a physical scientist is providing factual assessment to folks at OMB and the political folks there don't like their assessment, that person will now be able to be fired. Isn't that right?
Senator, that is not at all what the
Isn't that
goal
right,
of
though? You will make them at will as opposed to having any merit-based protections. Isn't that what you're going to do?
Senator, the goal of the proposal is to ensure that the individuals implicated are delivering the highest level of services for the American people.
Yep. I see under senior policy analysis, you got a toxicologist, you got a physical scientist. I would just say to our colleagues, you're going down a very dangerous road here by taking these positions that have been merit-based career positions and turning them into political positions subject to politicization in these positions. It is a very bad idea, and I hope you will reconsider. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Duncan, for being with us today and for your willingness to serve the country. I want to talk to you briefly first about the proposed uniform guidance reforms. These are reforms that are intended to save the taxpayer money, to make government operate more effectively, more efficiently, and keep the government focused on what it's supposed to be doing rather than opening the door to waste, fraud, abuse, and other problems, including some violations of federal law. From your perspective, how would these proposed uniform guidance reforms help improve the federal government's ability to accomplish these goals, to safeguard taxpayer funds and while simultaneously holding responsible any grantees that failed to comply with these requirements?
Absolutely, and I appreciate the question, Senator. So 2 CFR updates are, as I mentioned, all about accountability. It's ensuring that some of these outrageous spending that we have seen in the past is not going out the door by adding an additional layer of accountability, by having a political appointee, someone that is directly responsible to the president and directly accountable to the president, saying, hey, this is a good use of these funds, we believe this, or asking some additional questions before it goes out, or saying no. I think some additional items in there that we're really excited about, ensuring that DEI practices are not being funded by grants, ensuring that illegal immigration is not being funded by grants. We certainly saw that in the last administration. Ensuring that radical gender ideologies aren't being funded by grants, and putting additional controls to ensure fraud is not committed, and if it's identified, is sent to a prosecuting authority. Finally, I think one thing that we're really excited about as well is an e-verify requirement for grant recipients. We think it's fundamental that someone that is receiving taxpayer dollars from the federal government through grants is hiring folks that are authorized to work here. So that does that for both the prime recipient and the sub-recipients. In addition to other things that we're doing in the guidance, we think this will really help us wrap our arms around the $1 trillion grant enterprise.
By the way, speaking of political appointees, a minute ago you were asked questions in a way that suggested that political appointees are somehow bad, that it's a bad thing. The process is set up to be political, is it not? And political, the word itself refers to sort of the people, by the people, for the people, doesn't it?
Absolutely, Senator. The political appointees are the ones directly accountable to the president, who Article 2 of the Constitution vests the executive authority through the election by the people.
So we elect a president, and then the suggestion being that to have a political appointee is somehow problematic, and yet the alternative is basically the deep state, the sort of permanent career civil servant class, people who are more or less insulated from the political process. So when they rail against political appointees, they're really railing against accountability to the voter, because the president is elected by the people and is expected to do the job the people hired the president to do. Now, in the end, I suspect that these reforms, when implemented, will be very helpful. On a different topic, I've introduced in the last Congress and again in this Congress some reforms under the title of the America First Act. The America First Act aims to make sure that we turn off at least one of the sources of attraction, one of the things that bring people here illegally and keep them here illegally. It would ensure that only U.S. citizens and also lawful permanent residents can participate in a whole host of federal benefits that are designed to help Americans, certainly not illegal aliens, including Medicaid, SNAP, housing benefits, education benefits, and a handful of other programs. So I guess, Mr. Duncan, my question for you is, should the opportunity arise, as I hope it does, for us to do another round of reconciliation this year, will you commit to working with Republicans in Congress to help us enact these new restrictions?
Senator, absolutely, and I think we made a down payment on some of those restrictions in the Working Families Tax Cut Act, making sure that these services intended for the American people and American citizens are in fact going to American citizens.
These things are paid for by the American people. They were benefits created for the American people. And when we ease up on restrictions on those, when we make it too easy for those who are not citizens, particularly those who came here illegally or remained here illegally, we encourage more of that same thing to happen, and that in turn makes it far more difficult for us to provide these benefits to those for whom they were created, namely American citizens. Thank you very much, Mr. Duncan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Merkel has a few follow-up questions.
Mr. Duncan, you mentioned that President Ford in 1975 had done a pocket rescission. Are you aware of other pocket rescissions up to the current administration?
Senator, no, not off the top of my head.
Okay, well, the reason why is because after that Ford decision occurred, you had several Supreme Court decisions. One of them made it very clear that in general, any sort of impoundment is unacceptable, and rescission is done without Congress as a form of impoundment. And then you had a 1983 decision that said both houses have to vote affirmatively on a rescission. That's actually in the 1974 Act, so it reaffirmed what the Act said, that a rescission had to be done. And then Clinton versus New York ruled out the line item veto, which is essentially a rescission. Pocket rescission is kind of like a line item veto. That's why it's never happened since Ford. So I just wanted to note that that foundation in law, the Ford example doesn't at all address legitimacy or illegitimacy. The law still says any rescission must be done and signed by both houses of Congress, or must be passed by both houses of Congress. Second, I was very concerned that the budget submitted for this last year did not have any deficit and debt projections. The law actually requires the budget that the president submits to have deficit and debt information. Will you push to make sure deficit and debt information is in the next submission to Congress?
Senator, I appreciate the question, and as Director Vought testified when he was up here discussing the budget, our budget for FY27 was a discretionary budget. We wanted to help kick off the
No, I understand, but the
27
law requires deficit and debt. Will you work to follow the law in the next submission to Congress?
Senator, certainly will work to follow the law. I want to note that we will release additional projections of that sort like we did last year in the mid-session review, which will come this summer.
I want to note that when Vought did testify, he said he didn't follow the law because he didn't want to confuse the American public. Two problems with that. First of all, that says the American public are idiots. They're not idiots. They follow deficit and debt very closely. This is a big problem for the United States of America. And second of all, he is not authorized to break the law. And if you're working for him as a deputy, I hope you'll raise a yellow flag if he seeks to break the law again by not putting deficit and debt into. I raised another issue, was the shutdown of programs that are authorized and funded. And right now, there's a program called the Ocean Observatories Initiative that has 900 sensors in the ocean. And the administration announced that it is going to take out 4 of the 5 arrays of these ocean sensors, which measure current direction, temperature, photoplankton, acidity, salinity, and so forth, which are pretty much important information about the oceans. Congress has not asked these sensors to be taken out. They've not asked this program to be shut down. And there is a law on the books that says that to undo a program that's over $2.5 million in the Commerce, Justice, and Science, funded through the Commerce, Justice, and Science, there has to be, even if it's just being decommissioning it, it has to have a 30-day notice to Congress. Are you familiar with whether any such 30-day notice was given?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the program in question. I would have to defer to the Department of Commerce on that. And I would really quick note that Director Vought, when he was up here testifying on not including mandatory, what he said was in context of of another reconciliation bill coming down the pike. So I just wanted to contest the characterization of how it was framed in terms of what he was discussing when he put forward that assertion about just putting a mandatory budget forward.
You mean the assertion about not confusing the public, that assertion?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any, okay. I understand why you would want to defend the director. I did not find wanting to not confuse the country as a legitimate reason to hide the deficit and debt numbers. Really hope that, because both Democrats and Republicans have weighed in and said, don't dismantle this ocean array. It's authorized, it's funded, and the law requires notice to Congress. And it is, but from every scientist we can talk to, I mean, sheer stupidity to pull out an array that costs hundreds of millions. Its information's been used in over 500 studies. It's an example of what I'm talking about, of the administration trying to respect the separation of powers. If Congress says to you, take it out, fine. If they do that by law. But when it's authorized and funded and the administration just says, well, we don't like this program, so we'll rip it out, that's not okay. My final point, I just want to emphasize that the actions that have been taken in which grants are awarded preferentially to states that have either state leadership or federal elected leadership that is red rather than blue, that's unacceptable. Will you pledge to keep the sense of not having grants allocations, I guess, contaminated by partisan undertakings or influences?
Senator, certainly commit to ensuring that grants are spent in accordance with the law, but fundamentally in accordance with the president's priorities as well.
Okay, but that didn't answer my question. So will you commit to keeping partisan influence out of the award of grant programs?
Senator, obviously, the people elected the president, as we discussed last night. He's given discretion within the boundaries of the statutes to award grants based off of his policy views. So we'll certainly commit to abiding by the law and effectuating the president's
All right.
agenda.
So I have to wrap this up, but
Yes, you do.
hope that view will change. Just think about it.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. I do hope that you will enact the president's priority regardless of the state, and you have a chance to enact budgets and grants based on the priorities of this president, and I hope he will take advantage of that as other presidents have. That's what elections are all about, Senator Merkley. So I want to thank Mr. Duncan for appearing before the committee. The hearing record will remain open until noon tomorrow for the submission of statements and questions for the record to the committee clerk. Well done, Mr. Duncan. The hearing is adjourned. We did it.